Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Flummerfeld. I hope you're having a good week. I wanted to give you this lecture here to help you a little bit to move along in the school improvement work that you're doing. Now, just keep in mind that you're still working through your book, Bowman and Deal with the four-frame model, which enhances multi-frame thinking. And then we're also doing this school continuous improvement project as you work through this semester. So each week you'll be doing a little bit on those. And I'm going to go back to the course homepage in a little bit, but just for now, let's talk about the school improvement work and some more things about lean. So I want to show you a few examples here of some lean tools. One is called the voice of the customer and a waste walk. And then this whole idea I want to make sure you capture around creating value. That's what we're trying to do. Remember, the mind map for lean is respect for people based on, using continuous improvement. And then what we're trying to do is create value, and we do that by driving out waste. And so that's how you frame your school improvement project work. So let's see here what the voice of the customer is. So what we do with voice of the customer is we take our data sets. So you can do your waste walk. You can have other observations. You can have survey data. You can, take social media postings to get a lot of qualitative information from that. You can, walk around and see what's going on, right? And then, of course, any other kind of feedback loop that you have. So we have both qualitative and quantitative data that you might have for your project. Now, you may not have all of this, but you'll have to either take some time to gather a little bit of it, or maybe you already have it. And I think most of you do have some data already. When what we want to do is use that data to figure out, based on your credo of customers, where you prioritized your stakeholder map and you figured out who your top tier customers are, who your second level customers are, and your third level customers. So we want to, again, really understand what that top tier customer wants, and then go ahead and tend to the other levels as appropriate. So when we're trying to capture this voice of the customer, that's the customer, the top tier customer we want from your credo. And so what we'll do is we'll take their input. So you've got your credo map and you can see who's at the top and so on. And then, you'll gather data from them, or maybe you already have it. And so then you will now start to understand what they want. This is called their voice. And what you can do with that data is you can get a little bit more specific, and you can do something that's called a quality function deployment. So the voice of the customer just out there as different data sets and so on, that's helpful. It gives you something, but you can actually pull it together and be a lot more precise with it if you take their feedback and then you lay it down against organizational requirements and maybe technical requirements. So let's say your school has a mission, vision, values, and goals. And then let's say the State Department of Education, or maybe there's some other kind of larger framework, such as, for special ed or MTSS or whatever. So those technical requirements you also have to be aware of. And so you want to see where all that intersects. And then that will help you to see where should you be focusing this project. Because, your projects are systems that are complex, right? And they need that multi-frame thinking. And so let's see what we can do about getting this down pat. So we've talked a little bit about before Gemba Kaizen. Gemba, you go to the real place and you want to see what's wrong. And this is where, we'll get to this in a minute, but this is where your waste walk will help you a lot. You'll be able to check off all those forms of waste. You'll be able to see where it is. You're documenting it, making a few notes on it. Again, you're not judging anybody. You're not evaluating people. You're simply looking at waste that exists in a process or a system. And so that will help you to understand, as you go through your plan, do, check, adjust cycle, where things are wrong, and help you to get to that problem statement. So you kind of take things apart, you'll disassemble it, And then you kind of do, you do what's called reverse engineering, but with improvements where you're going to go ahead and bring forward then some ideas. You want to get that zero defect thinking going so that you're at a different level of performance. So I'll kind of show you how you can possibly pull all this together. Although I have some very specific assignments that, that you'll do when you do your continuous improvement work. So here's an example, for instance. This is where we were trying to get the voice of the employee on this one. And what we were trying to do is figure out from them around a particular performance problem, what was wrong. And so they said, well, here's basically what they told us is we have poor mentoring, we don't have good professional development, and we don't have a clear vision. And so what we do is we can say, okay, we know when we run this certain process, like the process of PLCs or the process of instructional delivery in reading literacy or the process of special education IEPs, whatever that process is, there are certain things we're looking for process quality. So we're looking, is it working on a daily basis? Does it give us high performing teamwork? Because we know that teamwork makes it all come together. Is this happening in a healthy work environment? Is the culture there? Are we using data to drive the practices? And what about those even required professional standards, things that we have to do legally that we're required to do that are compliance driven? And so then we can kind of figure out what our current measure is for mentoring, PD, and vision. And then you can lay that down against, let's say, the region or the state or whatever it might be. And you can see, are you lower than like just the general benchmark or not? So this tells you you definitely have a performance problem for mentoring, for PD, and for lack of vision. You're down 20 to 15% on each of those. So you're way below like what's considered a accepted benchmark. Then what we also will do here is we'll look at some other technicalities. So when we are looking at the delivery of a service, educational service, let's say, or even more specific, the delivery of our reading literacy program or delivery of our ESL program or delivery of our child care services, whatever that might be, right? So we can look at, are we delivering, things accurately? Is it strong? Is there fidelity to it? Is there resilience to it? Is there quality? Are our customers happy with it? Or are the students failing, the parents complaining? And then what method are we using to deliver it? Because now, of course, in education, we have all kinds of choice as to method and even pedagogy, right? So we can do all kinds of things there. And so we lay these three categories, mentoring, PD, and vision, against these just expectations for how things are done in our district, based on standards, and then the specific things against the program that we're looking for. We kind of look for those intersections. So when they talk about poor mentoring, are they saying they need mentoring for what? And so we're going to do an X and an O here, so you can see here. So we're saying for mentoring, we need mentoring on daily planning for efficiency, right? And we need mentoring for a healthy work environment and professional practices. We need the same for the service quality. So we've got all those same three, plus we see for the service quality that the strength of the standard is lacking around poor mentoring. So poor mentoring would help solve this problem. Better mentoring would help solve the problem of the strength in the standards. You can kind of see where the X's and O's intersect against these three categories. And you can go on there, with PD and lack of vision and so on. So what you do then is you look at these and you say, well, there's a bunch of things I can see here. Is first of all, if I'm going to do an improvement project where I'm looking to improve, particular program, then what I want to see here is where are things looking the worst. Where do I get both the X and the O, and I'm, below the benchmark standard and so on. And so you'll see here for mentoring, we have 3. For generic PD, we have 2. For lack of vision, we have 1. And so then you can look up and down these columns and say, well, the mentoring is hitting the work environment and quality here, and so is lack of vision. And so that gives you some clues here in terms of a little more specific analysis of the problem. And the same thing, that you can do with all of these. So what we're doing here is we're trying to understand where we're going to focus. And so this is, the stuff in yellow is where our light bulb goes off and says, this is more specifically the problem. And so our current measures we know are below what's expected. And we also, this is based on, not what we think and maybe not what the next district over thinks, but what our customer, the VOC, the voice of our customer, is telling us based on the data we've collected. So we know our mentoring, PD, and vision casting, they need to improve in specific areas here. And so that helps us. So, you can pick out 1 or 2 of these, and that would become your school improvement project. And so you guys have your areas picked out, and I know you're kind of drilling down into your problem statement. So you might be able to use your customer credo. And if you have any data at all like this, you can take it further and do this quality function deployment. So here's an example here that you have to work with. And so what we're trying to do is we're collecting data sets on teacher views of barriers to teaching quality. And we're trying to increase student achievement by 5% in 2 years. So you can see this is a really good SMART goal. We have a timeline, we have an actual measure on it, we have something very specific and relevant that we can work on here. So the more specific you can be on your voice of the customer, the better off. And so we found these things. We saw, again, this one is a similar example here, but we have these areas of practice that are a little bit different: instructional planning and delivery, knowledge of student learning, learning environments, data-driven practice, and professional practice. Kind of similar, but slightly different lists there. And then we can even just take one of these, right, and go ahead and do an analysis. You don't always have to have both the technical and the, kind of organizational or, educationally based standards. You can even do one of these. So we're looking for where these intersections are happening. Again, if you have current measures and state measures on this, that will help a lot. And so you can see here where your X's are happening. And we can see now what we need to do. All right. So if you know that, there's a couple things you can do. We've talked about waste walks before, and we know that we have these actual categories of waste, because when we have this in categories, it helps us when we actually see it, right? So when you see it, say, oh yeah, I get that. So overproduction, doing more than what we need to do; over processing, where we have too many steps. So those are very connected, but the overproduction is pretty much when you just have way too many programs. We have this idea in education of comprehensive programs, right? And so we try to offer everything to everybody all the time. And then what starts to happen is things get so cluttered, and we have a lot of waste. And so what do our students really want? What do they really need? What is our community and parents, what do they want? Over processing is when you have way too many steps. So, what does it take for you to get a cell phone, for instance? How many approvals are needed for you to receive a cell phone, if that's a part of your, package that you get as an employee, and so on. So what does that look like? What about going on field trips? What does that process look like? And so you can streamline that, say, why are we collecting information more than once? Transport, this is where we're moving things around, people and things around. And, basically the whole educational model is about transport. Is you move a student down the hallway of education from grade, kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, and they're just moving through that hallway. And so we say, well, is all that movement necessary? And what does that all look like? For instance, could movement make more sense? Let's say if you have a student who's accelerated and maybe they can go in fourth grade into fifth grade math, right? So they're not just moving methodically the same way with all of that. They can move right where they need to go, just in time. Motion. This is where, we have, I mean, you got to think about it. We have students in our classroom and there's a lot of motion going on in your classroom. So how do they come in? How do they hang up their coats or put their book bags? Of course, now we have cell phones that have to be checked in. How much motion does that take to get that all done? So you can find a lot of ways to make sure that we get rid of that. Why? Because even 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, if you can save that every day, that's instructional time, right? You can create a value added situation for the students then. Waiting, this is where your people, tell you have to get permission or a sign off, or you're waiting for a teammate to do something that's not being done in a timely manner. Inventory, this is hoarding. You go in classrooms and you open up file drawers and cabinets, and we have textbooks that, are 10 years old, we haven't used them for 10 years. Get rid of them. They're taking up space, and that space, if you think about it, could be used for something else really cool. Make your classroom, have a little more physical space and flow to it. Overburden, this is where we work, without the kind of support or resources. This is typical in education. We get unfunded mandates from the state where the state will say, yeah, you've got to do this. They're like, well, you need to give us the money, and then they don't. So, that happens. Or, somebody says, well, we want to do this, we think this is a good idea. So you just go ahead and do it. We expect you to do it. But, there's no support or resources for it. Unevenness in work, right? And that's where you have some people work harder than others, and it's like an unfair, unequal distribution of responsibility for, the same pay scale and so on. Knowledge, this is where, we have new teachers coming in, new administrators coming in. We don't make sure that they have a good induction period. We just put them in the classroom, put them in the administrative offices or wherever they end up, and just tell them, go ahead, day one, get started. And so, they don't have the knowledge they need. Those knowledge gaps are going to cause a lot of risk, to your school, to your students, and to that individual professional as well. So we want to make sure we're transferring knowledge and recognizing when there's not knowledge transfer, that's a waste. Environmental, of course, this is where, we're harming people and the planet and, not handling things. I mean, of course, there's OSHA standards and so on, especially if you get into the science labs and the chemicals, that are being handled. But there's also, if you think about, I mean, all the paper we use in schools and so on, there's a lot. And then, of course, the social waste. And this is where bullying's happening, or not just bullying, but maybe people aren't being included or they don't feel like they belong. And so we lose all that capacity from them, engagement. So you can take a look and see when you do your waste walk what happens. Now, you can do the waste walk before you do the voice of the customer and your customer credo if you want to just look at the process and see what it is, or you can do it after. So I don't want you to think about these tools as being like in a certain order all the time. I'm going to have you do them in a certain order in the class, just so we kind of work through that together. But you can mix these things up. These are tools in a toolkit for you, and you need to pull the tool out, to address and fix the problem that, appropriately. So far we have now, of course, our Gemma Kaizen, we have our voice of the customer, and we have our waste walk. So let's kind of see, this is a possible flow. And again, these things can be moved around quite a bit. So, you do your Kaizen, right? And you're going to see, okay, what does this tell me about the project I need to do? And many of you already knew your Kaizen before you came in, but then you want to, once you have your project, you want to get your credo map, get that voice of the customer analysis, do your waste walk. And again, these first 5 steps here, they can kind of come in all different order. You could start with a waste walk. That will make you do a Kaizen. And then you start to say, well, who is the customer? What do they want? Now I'll scope out a project. So these can go in a little bit different order depending on what you're doing. But what you're trying to do is start to get into that plan, do, check, adjust cycle, and you're trying to get down to that statement of the problem. And so that'll come here, whatever order steps 1 through 5 go in, when you get to step 6, that's why you're doing this. You want to try to specifically define the problem. Then that allows you to move to the next step where you create a value-added target condition, and then you see how you measure it as pilots occur. And then you keep going, you'll go through the full PDCA cycle. You want to find a tested solution. So you get through that full Kaizen and you've got those new outcomes, right? New benchmarks that are different. So again, steps 1 through 5, you can kind of decide, how you're going to do those in general. And then, but what we're trying to do is get to step, 6, 7, and 8 here. And that's really what we're trying to do. So let me give you an example of something that happened here. This was a client and they had a childcare program. And what they wanted to do, they were looking at the whole child care program and they weren't really sure where to start. They knew there were all kinds of things wrong. And so, a waste walk was done. Here's the customer credo that we know that, parents, students, and the state, which, highly regulates childcare programs, were the top level customers. Then we have on the next level all the process owners. So we have the business office, there's a lot of funds that are collected. And of course, all the HR functions with making sure we have properly credentialed people, properly trained, and so on. And then, of course, campus leaders and staff who are delivering these programs. And then what we said is, let's try to get a sponsor because this might help you also. If you can find somebody who is who's like a notch up from you on the hierarchy, and maybe your mentor would be someone to do this. But if you can say, look, here's what I'm trying to do, and can you say, can you help me to say and translate this, that, this is a cool project, or, we're not going to do this right now. And then it'll help you to understand. But basically, we went through and did all of our work. We did our concept maps and we did our process maps and so on. And you'll learn about some of these other tools also, Ishikawa's and 5 Whys and so on. And what we did is we found that there were process improvements needed in all these areas. The site licensing, the compliance to it, the staff licensing and the PD required, the way PowerSchool or the student information system was working with childcare, how we have enrollment going, the process for that, the options, how we're internally communicating and externally communicating about our childcare program. We also had a lot of safety issues. The cost and convenience of the program, how expensive is it? It starts to become too expensive for some families, or maybe the hours or whatever may not have the convenience that families are looking for. And then just the quality of what's done. Is your student just going to sit there in a chair and, twiddle their thumbs or, whatever? Are they doing some good fun learning activities or whatever? And so, we did waste walks and Kaizens. We went through and we did these. So it was a November, December, January kind of a timeline where what we were trying to do is very quickly bring these things forward. So we didn't take all of these at once. The ones that have something marked here are the ones that came into queue. And so we had site licensing, staff licensing, internal, external communication, of course, safety. And so we are very worried about these ones, having to do with compliance around the site and staff. We're very worried about safety, right? So these were big ones. So we set up our process improvements for them. And then we went ahead and just said, okay, at the end of November, where were we? And some of them we did okay. Some of them we failed. Some of them we hit the mark. And so, of course, with safety, that was really important to hit that right away, as would be the site licensing and then the staffing also. So as we went through the months, then we kept track. You keep going at this. It's a continuous improvement cycle until we feel like we got it and it's sticking. You start to see 2 or 3 months of just solid. We hit the metric, we hit the performance benchmark, whatever. And so this was a good way just to kind of keep this all together and give us a scorecard, right? Where we're seeing how we're doing. How did we know if we met or failed or improved? Well, you go and do another waste walk. You look at your process map and you see, have we hit the improvements? You take a look at your A3 and what you're documenting on that. Are we catching all of our lessons learned? What does our checking look like after we've launched a pilot? Are we, just letting it go and not following up? Or are we actually going back to the pilot, making sure it's perfect? So that just gives you an example of where you could potentially go with some of this data that you collect and work that you do. All right, I think Lauren came on. Lauren, do you have any questions?
Nope, not right now.
All right, good. Well, welcome. Good to have you. So this was, what we're just at the end here, Lauren. So, the idea here again is you commit yourself to doing this school continuous improvement process, and you remain open and you remain, you keep yourself so that you have the ability to make these improvements, but you want to test them beforehand, make sure that they're really working. And so all these tools are made, again, they're made for sharing and being transparent and collaborating. And so, just think about what you have now, what you've learned so far. You've got quite a few. And then of course you can do your Bowman and Deal reframing also, right? And you've got tests for each one of those, structural, HR, and so on, because now we're moving into that. So that's all I had to share with you, except that I did want to show you the course homepage here. And let me get that up for you. Now let's see. Give me a second here. Lauren, are you doing okay with everything?
Yes, I just kind of wanted to flesh out a couple of ideas that I had going about my school improvement. I was actually talking to my principal about it, and
Okay.
he suggested a few things. One of them being working on our dismissal process, which I've wrote about in some of the posts.
Yeah.
But then I was also looking at using tests, using data-driven items to like drive test scores to increase math scores. And I
Okay.
just feel like with that one, I can have more like actual data and actual numbers I can look at.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think either one of those would be good. Of course, with the test score one, that's probably going to be a little more long term. You can make quite a bit of progress with it this semester. Where the dismissal project is a shorter term project, in my view. I don't know what problems you're dealing with in this dismissal, so that could be totally incorrect. Uh, but it doesn't matter to me if you fully finish the project. I just
Okay.
want you well into the PDCA process. So which one are you favoring then?
The data for
Okay.
so right now I'm teaching sixth, seventh, and eighth. And I was thinking about just doing sixth and seventh because adding eighth and there would be a lot. And then you can see kind of for the future, since I'm going to eighth grade or going to the seventh grade, how that worked.
Mm-hmm. I think that's great. And even just to take a look at, like you say, you're going to have data that's going to show you where the problems are, right? And
Mhm.
you want to put that against the voice of the customer and prioritize your customer, right, with your
Right.
credo. So you're going to want to make sure you've got that laid out, because what you think, for instance, as a classroom teacher or administrator might be a great solution, to a student, it may have zero value, you know? And
Mhm.
so we always want to make sure we understand who we're serving, but you still even, when you're creating a value-added solution to, let's say, the student, you still have, faculty delivering that instruction and managing that classroom and all the activities. So they're definitely in there. They're probably a mid-level customer.
Right.
And if they don't see it as value added, they're not going to do it. And so that's not what you're looking for. So it's going to be interesting. And that's why you'll do that plan, do, check, adjust cycle. You're going
Mhm.
to try it in a pilot. And then, even before you do that, you're going to figure out what exact problem am I trying to solve. And there's probably a bunch of them in,
Mhm.
in math achievement. There could be a bunch of them, but try to scope it down so you got something,
Okay.
you can work with. And then go ahead and develop your target condition, what you want to do to pilot it. Then you'll check those results and you'll see, and you'll see, okay, did this work or not? And then you'll decide, I need to adjust this, or this is a lesson I learned, or actually this was great and we're going to try to carry it forward and do it across all math delivery and, 6 and 7 or whatever that looks like, right? Or just do it, throughout the year, whatever it might look like, to expand it and make it standard practice, best practice for your school.
Okay, that makes sense.
Does that help you?
Yes, that helps a
Okay,
lot.
good. That's going to be cool. I like that a lot. So let me get back here to a couple things. In the welcome block, we do now have our round one chapter facilitations. And Lauren, if I'm not mistaken, you've got yours for chapter 4 posted. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, you did a great job on that. So,
Mm.
and then Laquita does have to post chapter 3. And I was a little late getting this out to you. I was waiting for the choices to be made. So she's assigned that, but chapter 3 is moved down. So you're going to do 3 and 4 this week,
Okay.
either as a respondent or a facilitator. And so if you haven't made your round 2 choices yet, you can see those choices haven't been completed, but go ahead and do that because that time is going to fly and you'll
Yeah, I
forget about
did.
this. Good, good. That's great. So then they'll move down to September 17th. So here's your chapter 4, which you've done. You have posted your form here. Laquita will also do it. So I moved chapter 3 down, so you guys have an extra week on 3. And then this is your lecture for today. I'll give you the slides I are there for you. And then you have some exemplars here for your waste walk and voice of the customer. So you can use those, and then you're going to be doing a voice of the customer analysis for your school improvement project. So you have your outline, you have a basic idea, and then you're just going to, let's see what you got here for your credo and your voice of the customer. And you can use the exemplar to do this, okay? So
Okay.
look, you're starting to get a really good baseline, and notice how much time we're taking before you actually pilot anything. This
Mhm.
is all about understanding and plan, that first step, what the problem is. And so we spend our time on this, 25% of our time we're doing this plan work and looking at the data and so on. So then you'll go ahead, we'll get into September 24th and moving on to chapter 5. And then you'll do a waste walk, and this will be based on what you came up with your voice of the customer. So as I mentioned, I think before you got on, these tools that you've learned here at the beginning, they don't have to be used in a specific order. We're doing that
Okay.
here in the class, but they're just a toolkit for you. You can pull them out and use them in any order that you wish.
Okay.
All right, and then we've got our online synchronous class here on October 1st, so that's coming up. It's actually just now a couple of weeks away. And then you'll just continue on. Your professional growth plan is here. And your mentor, of course, needs to be selected and sending me a confirming email. And then we'll just move on from there, and I'll show you the rest of this later. So anyway, we've got some good things going on here. How are you doing with the pace of the class, Lauren? Is it working pretty well, do you think, or not?
I think it's going good. At first I was a little confused, like what was due and what needs to be due. And plus with the other class, I was kind of all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of got like centered and and kind of organized myself, starting with myself first. That helped a lot.
Yeah, for sure. So, and I'm sure the other class is probably templated differently than this one, and that's fine. But yeah, really for this, if you just stay focused on the
Mhm.
weekly calendar and, get that all posted. And of course, as everybody's kind of getting adjusted to all of that, I give you a little bit of a break here at the beginning, but then, after, starting October 1, I hope everybody's settled in. And then I'm going to expect you to submit your stuff on time, during the week that's there. You'll lose some points if you don't. Um, but anyway, so I'm glad to hear that. And for anybody else who's listening later, again, please feel free, reach out if you need anything.
Okay.
All right, is there anything else I can help you with, Lauren?
That is it. You already answered the question I was going to have about the week 3 form. So we're going to
Oh,
do those together next week. So that's
yeah,
you answered that
yeah, yeah.
already.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it actually, so it starts today because today's the 17th and you already have yours posted. So your form
mhm,
is there. So for you as the facilitator, you're going to watch the posts that come in, respond to people, and I'll respond to everything, yours,
mhm,
everybody else's. And then Laquita will also post her chapter 3 and we'll get that up and running. And then we'll close it here, September 23rd. We can extend it a couple of days here, like I say, till the end of the month, just till everybody's got the hang of it.
mhm.
And then this next one here, everybody should be pretty close. By September 30th, everything is, after September 30th, everything's done on time. Then I think everyone has their books in the swing of things. Okay.
Yep. Okay, that makes sense. No
All
questions from
right.
me.
Good, good. Well, so good to see you and look forward to seeing you again, I guess, at our next meeting there in
Right.
October. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome, Lauren. Have a great, great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.